Let me introduce Michael Tsarion to the program. Michael Tsarion, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks a lot. Sorry about the hassle there.
Hey, it happens. We're used to it. But we have a powerful show nonetheless, and we'll get right into it. I don't want to waste any more time. We could talk about the news stories any other day of the week. Michael, the program tonight, and you wanted to title it this, and I'm very excited about the title, and I want to learn more. It's called The Posthuman World and the End of Evil. Tell me more.
Well, that's basically the title of the season of talks we're preparing in London. Is the first one, and in my head it was a carry-on, sort of part 2 of Age of Manipulation, which is a very long series of talks. So that's, in my head, it's basically that. But the first part was almost strictly on symbolism, because I've been doing that for years and years, and had been hesitating to get into some of the darker aspects of it. But last year, we went for broke and did a 3-month-long presentation. And that constituted part 1. Symbolism, the media, the sort of solar cult symbolism that proliferates, and some of the more darker aspects of child abuse and what have you, ritual magic and stuff. Basically the sorcery aspect. So we covered that really deeply. I finally got my chance to go very deeply into that symbolism stuff, and it was really a big success. So then this year we're doing part 2, and this time we focus on the posthuman agenda. It's all connected, so again, even though there's different titles, all of the subject matter is connected. So this time we're going to focus on where we're heading as a species. Lots of new information, which is fantastic, because I love that. And also just more, solutions, very, very much solutions. The entire latter part is in fact solutions.
Well, that's what this show is all about, Michael.
Oh, could you repeat that?
I was saying that's what this program is all about. And I'm glad you're sharing this with us, because that seems to be the direction a lot of researchers are moving to. More solution-oriented, the better. Yeah,
there's plenty of people that have great solutions, and I concur with a great deal. I think we're all on the same page. I think first of all, we all want solutions. And I've already said years ago that I think that most of us, certainly the people in this movement, certainly know what the problems are. I mean, it's not just, Joe Sixpack, where you got to start at A. In the beginning, once upon a time, there was a conspiracy. I don't think we need to go there. At least I don't, and most of the listeners are aware that there's something really bad going on. And in my work, I've done that, so it's you're honor bound to continue the research and then elaborate on the various solutions to those situations, trying to make those solutions as grassroots as possible so that anyone at all can use them. Because I'm not saying that, okay, if Michael Tsarion hands down solutions are going to be so abstract and complicated that then nobody will, know what to do. No, I'm not saying that. It's that we do need the solutions, and then once they are sort of laid out clearly and distinctly, then they're very applicable to every human being, because once you've stepped out of that square that David Icke talks about, you can apply any solution. It doesn't matter about your culture or your race or your class or some other nonsense that or your gender or, financial bracket or level of intelligence. None of that's important. My work goes to the fact that everyone's a human being. And if you're human and you have the anatomy of a human being and the intelligence of a human being, then you are absolutely capable of working with those solutions. Any problem that the mind of man can create, the mind of man can solve.
A lot of people are skeptical of an end to evil. There's a lot of doom and gloom out there. And I want to ask you about that at some point. I mean, because pragmatically speaking, we do have to deal with a lot of evil. And unfortunately, as things get more and more light shed on them, we start to notice some of the dirt that we once didn't see. So some of those things start, I think that's an analogy I stole from Sai Baba or some thinker. But I want to talk to you about that, because although I feel a positive paradigm shift amongst a lot of great thinkers and people who are solution-oriented, I feel like it's a difficult thing, and we'll talk about that, the end of evil and the post-human world. Michael, bear with us here. We got to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll get into things and we'll get going, all right?
Okay.
Thanks so much. All right, hold that thought, folks. It's the Bob Tuskin Show. Don't go anywhere. All right, Michael, so how do we bring an end to evil?
Well, the most important thing is to first find out what it is. That's where my work started with the Atlantis work, is to try and have an alternative view, because almost exclusively everybody normally bought into the religious view or some other very tawdry so-called scientific view, and those have no teeth at all. They not only do not explain the question of evil, they make it more complicated so that people who have to deal with evil every day, police, military, people who think about it, people who've experienced it, or get jaded and depressed because they see all of this happening, and of course all of us do, and we step aside and we kind of have learned to just not question evil itself. We've learned to recognize it, we've learned to respond towards it, we've learned how to react to it, but we really haven't learned what it is. And it's because the sources of information, those who said, that's not for you, that's for us to explain, well, they haven't explained it. So my work coming into this field started with the question of evil to try and give a cogent explanation, completely alternative though. So that's why people who would read my work need to change their settings quite drastically, because it is a very, very different approach. It's one that makes sense to me, and has obviously made sense a lot to the readers. And then it was to build on that, and then slowly as time has passed, the only alternative that you can have is to go into a philosophical or psychological paradigm, because if you really want to know the solutions, one thing that is different with my take on it than, say, most of my confederates in the conspiracy movement is the fact that I don't leave consciousness at the door. You have to stop pointing fingers at these sort of three-headed monsters. They are monsters, but constantly pointing fingers at them, doesn't really get to the heart of it. So finally, again, more like with Architects of Control, and then the talk last year, Age of Manipulation 1, I was able to get more deeply into the psychological aspect and break new ground there to try and get into this dynamic of human consciousness, because that's what we all share. We all have the capacity for evil within us. Other people have it more, and they have their morality less, and therefore it's about looking at the common denominators of consciousness in order to find out what this is all about. And that's not to say that it's all just willful, of course. In my Atlantis work, I kept showing that what we call evil is a byproduct or a symptom of great catastrophes, physical in nature. But those physical catastrophes that now scientists and geologists are slowly accepting did take place weren't the only thing, of course. There was the genetic interference. There was an inherent antipathy to nature. There's many ingredients. In this Age of Manipulation series, I get into what I describe the anatomy of tyranny, the anatomy of evil, really breaking it down in a sort of Plutonic way, getting into the core of it to find out. So it's not just the mere earth changes and the physical catastrophe, although that played a large part. It wasn't just the genetic interference with our biology, which I believe had happened in ancient times, but it was also this antipathy to nature. It was the birth of the ego, and it was some of the hardwiring that the ego has. And then as we come more to historical periods, it's also the contribution of society. It's how society treats us, treats the child, that then instilled in us the kind of pseudo-morality. And so it's lots of different ingredients. And I believe that when we actually do look into it this way, we will find that it's not actually that difficult to finish evil at all. It's not abstract. It's not difficult at all, and that's where we're going in these talks. I'm finally going to reveal my particular take on it. I will say that it will take a bit of time. It's not going to happen overnight. But from a historical point of view, it'll happen relatively quickly. To actually, banish evil as we know it completely from the human species. I mean, completely.
What would you say to those that believe that there is no such thing as evil per se? Maybe aberrant behaviors exist, but what would you say to somebody who says, well, I don't believe there's evil, even though we know that there's many awful things that I guess the word's evil, but I guess some would say, well, that's nothing maybe spiritual or anything, that's just aberrant behavior.
Well, then I'd send them to buy Ayn Rand's collected works as fast as possible, because I have personal great worries about people who come across with that. You get a lot of them in the New Age movement. And the next quote, the next thing that comes out of their mouth is all this stuff about universal love and brotherhood and all this other nonsense.
Right.
So I would immediately tell them, well, I've got real severe worries about you, because you're a kind of person who's lost the grip of even knowing what evil is. And if anyone in the human race ever, as Ayn Rand clearly said, starts to get blurry about what evil is, it will automatically lead them to be blurry in the end about what good is. And then we're really screwed, you know. So my situation in life is to help people to focus on calling a spade a spade. There are loveless and evil and unlovable people in this world. There are people who do the most brutal, crazy things. I obviously mitigate. I'm not talking about all criminals or people on death row. Many of those people were forced to do what they did. They're compelled to do what they did. They're not evil people. They may be, in fact, very moral people. And their boundaries may have been crossed to such a tremendous extent that then they reacted. So I'm not extremist. But at the same time, I do know that there is evil in the world, conscious, deliberate evil. It's been, I say, very age-old. And I've even spent time talking about who the people are that I consider to be evil, these various popes and these various royals and these, creatures of the Illuminati and various other people. So it exists. It absolutely exists. We have to be crystal clear about that. And we have no chance of holding on to what is the good if our vision, about evil gets in any way lessened or blurred. The religious people of the world have made it so. They've made it very complicated. So yes, if you're talking about evil in a metaphysical, religious, theological context, I'll agree with you that then we have lots of problems. Not less being that the people who talk about the greatest good, like religious people, are doing the greatest evil. So yeah, we got a real paradox there. But I think in normal conversation with sane people, there's no doubt about it that the abuse of animals, the abuse of nature, the treatment of women, the kind of ongoing massacres in the world, that Genghis Khan wanted to wipe out, and I'm not joking here, Genghis Khan literally wanted to wipe out the entire Eastern Europe and into Europe just to graze sheep. That's evil. The slaughter of women during the period of the Great Wars of Islam, when the Templars cities were, invaded and women were just bayoneted and all the rest of it. There's plenty of evidence.
You mean there's other things besides the Jewish Holocaust that were evil, Michael? No.
Well, there were. And then, of course, the death of any group, even including Jews. There have been pogroms, not just the Holocaust, but there's been pogroms in the Russian Pale, in Lithuania, all over the world, in Spain, and so forth and so on. There's been Irish massacre. In fact, my Irish Origins of Civilization is an attempt to bring the wholesale slaughter of the Druids, which seems to have always got a footnote, if that, is actually one of the world's first genocides. In fact, it occurred even before the Maya and the Aztecs were wiped out. So genocides we have plenty. Seems to be a strange absence of Native American Indian people in North America, precisely because of a thing called genocide. Same in the South of America, So we definitely have, what the Romans did to the Druids and what the Atlantists did. And oh my God, I could just go on and on and on.
Yeah, with our media though, and it seems like
there you go. Yeah.
they obsess. Perfect. The bias is to obsess about the Jewish Holocaust. And as I explained to you, I happen to come from a Jewish family, but by all means, why are we going to sit here and obsess about the Jewish Holocaust? Blah blah. It's ridiculous. But I digress, Michael. And even more of a troubling thing to me are people out there that don't necessarily think evil does or does not exist, but they think, well, if I could just think positive thoughts, right? And this is the whole secret, the mumbo jumbo. If I could just think positive thoughts, and if I don't think the negative thoughts, that everything's going to be okay. Now, my thoughts create my reality, so who cares if there's evil? As long as I don't think evil thoughts and I don't attract that, I'll be okay, and I can be as apathetic as possible. I have a bone to pick with people with that sort of philosophy.
I understand. I think that it's very good that people hold those theories. Of course, they look better on paper than most people actually do. I'm all for living a good life. I'm all for morality and for trying to do the most good that you can do and the least evil you can do. And I think that the vast majority of human beings operate on that basis. If there was no religion in the world, sort of John Lennon, perfect world, there definitely would be people doing that. However, my quibble or my analysis of those kinds of statements will always focus on what a person means by I. When they say that I will do this or I'm going to do that or I want to live a good life, this is a person, people who are speaking this are usually very psychologically, how would you say it, psychologically confused, or I use the word ignorant just in the slightest way, psychologically ignorant about what is an I. Because we all know that what we intend to do we often end up doing the very opposite. I mean, on a daily basis, I'm going to be really nice to people today, and then you're rude, or, whatever. So, you can't really always say that you're going to do something and then do it, So what we need to do is find out who is this I that is speaking. And there's your psychology again, in which we get into the who is the me, who is the I, who is this voice in my head that I've always assumed is myself. Is it a pseudo-self or is it a real self?
Sure, but people have no sense of self, Michael. That's a shame. They're controlled by the programming of the television and lose themselves. We got to take a quick break, Michael, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm tired of it, Michael. There's people out there, and they wake up and they see what's going on, and they're mad as hell, and then they put their head in the sand like an ostrich. And I'm tired of it. People need to get active. These are serious times.
Well, it's all in their own time. I've said many times that I know it's frustrating, and that's okay that it's frustrating, and we should hold that frustration and examine it. But at the same time, we mustn't become mini tyrants ourselves. The unawakened person is meant to be unawakened. We can't be blaming the architects of control for what they do, which is largely tyrannous, and then become sort of mini tyrants by forcing people to be where they're not. In one sense, especially if people are familiar with my work, they'll know that I'm always talking about that it never will happen where everybody is ever going to waken up. You can just completely jettison that from a consciousness. My work specifically is only for a very few people, always has been, always will be. And therefore, that's my focus. I've never entertained any collectivist ideas about everybody getting anything all in one big go or whatever. You will have larger movements waking up. That's where we're at right now. But to really suggest things like, that the rank and file ever change their life in any extraordinary way is absolutely, illogical in my way, because look how many great philosophers and teachers we've had down through the years, and they didn't manage it. So it's really not possible. And I think we have to just accept that. And the most important thing is that the individual is the one who does the homework and wakes up.
Yeah, and that's a problem, because sometimes I lose that self, and I say to myself, well, what about other people? And I get down on others around me and become a mini tyrant. Is that the technical term you use?
Yeah, I think that does happen. Now,
yeah.
The difference is, of course, that you're doing it out of love. You're tyrannizing, but you're doing it out of concern.
Unconditional love. But don't they justify some of their actions, saying that it's the good of the people for population control? And that's a fine line, slippery slope, huh?
Well, of course, justification is, a huge subject. One could get into that endlessly. Yeah, they do indeed do that.
And it's unfortunate because, we were talking off air about the study of philosophy. A lot of these philosophers, they say, well, if it's specifically the utilitarians, they say, well, if it's, if we have to take out 10 people to save 100 people, let's take them out. But what that leads, us vulnerable to is false flag terrorism, because they I don't know if it's possible they say this, but I guess some of them may think this, whoever they may be, the architects of control. They say to themselves, well, if we create this false flag terrorist attack, it will create enough of a stir of things so that we can then justify the war, and it will be good for business, everyone's okay. We had to sacrifice 3,000 plus people, but, well, we're going to do it for the greater good.
That's right. And most of these people, like the Jeremy Benthams and the John Stuart Mills and even the Thomas Hobbes, and their entire school, not all of them, but the main men there were proponents of large government. They were totally aware. In their mind, man was just a bestial creature who was probably, his mind was drunk with religion and all of this nonsense, and his morality was just a veneer. And if he wasn't controlled and if he wasn't told what to do, he would just fall about, in a state of total drunken, inebriated chaos. So they, in their own way, advocated social control, the control of a monarch or a king. Some may have said it in slightly more, flowery language in order to convince people they were right. But they were already collectivists, bona fide collectivists to begin with. They weren't really speaking to individuals at all. Their philosophies were to speak to sociological groups. That's why sociology, as a subject, deals so much with those particular philosophers, because they were speaking about groups and mass movements. They weren't really even speaking to the individual, and they certainly were years before any form of existentialism arose, in which the rights of the individual were more classically looked at. The philosophers in the past ages were speaking broadly, and this is of course a big flaw. Plato went on and on about his perfect republic, and again he wasn't speaking so much about individuals, he was speaking about mass movements. Hegel and his state, I don't blame Hegel as much as other people do. I think he's one of the most misunderstood philosophers, but having said that, he still did speak in terms of a society, of men who would come together in the perfect state and so on. So until you move up until the existential period with, the Kierkegaards and the Nietzsches and Heideggers and the Pontis and even the Foucaults, you're not really speaking about individuals as they stand on their own. And in religion, you never ever speak to the individual. I know that Protestantism and some of these other religions try to make it appear that they're speaking about you, an individual letting Christ into your heart, and that all sounds very individualistic, but it's really not at all, because it's every man, every individual letting Christ into his heart. One Christ, one God, one heaven, one road to get there. There's nothing individual about that. It's pure collectivism. So all religion, most of the metaphysical philosophers, and most of these pseudo-political philosophers today, the ones who are in positions of power, who are experts at these talismanic words of independence and individuality and peace, we obviously know that that's a bunch of nonsense. So none of these people speak to the individual at all. That's just a sort of a myth.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're frightened to death of freedom, and they're frightened to death of the individual. They're not individuals themselves. They come from a high consciousness, and they never speak to the individual.
Well, it's collectivism. It's a cabal. It's a fraternity. It's a culture that continues, and they can't be individuals. They're afraid of individuals. I like that. That resonates with me a lot. Michael, you're a true lover of wisdom, which is the literal definition of philosophy. And we could talk about philosophy, I'm sure, all day. But let me ask you a personal question. How do you deal with the burnout, what we like to call the burnout, the fatigue from becoming aware of all this information? And I mean, you have books and books and lectures on all sorts of very dark stuff. How do you deal with the burnout?
Well, you make it a companion. You fall in love with it. It's a necessary symptom, just like the fragrance of a rose is the effervescence of the rose. It's something that mustn't be shunned. It's something that must be embraced. I know that sounds very Nietzsche-like, and I kind of mean it in that sense. It's the scars and the bumps and the bruises that come with thrashing your way through the forest in order to awaken the princess. It's something that comes along with that journey. It can't just be joy. It can't just be Burning Man. It can't just be hippy-dippy, yeah, man, peace, love, and granola. It will come with those scars and those cuts and those bruises, but my God, it's worth it. So it's you dealing with your holy work. The greatest religion of all is you coming to greater awareness of what your purpose is here on this life. So even though it will involve encounters with other people who would rather stay asleep, and it certainly is frustration, and there's certainly a great deal of even pain involved in this awakening process, that pain is necessary. It's like the mother giving birth to the child. It's absolutely necessary. It can never be erased, and I'm very, very cautious of New Age groups and other people who are trying to allay it. I'm worried about even the pharmaceutical organizations who are trying to allay it. But I think in the individual's life, we have to embrace all aspects of the self. And these shadow aspects that do arise when you feel alienated and alone and misunderstood largely, it makes you great because you're in good company. The Wilhelm Reichs were misunderstood. The Ezra Pounds were misunderstood. The Spinozas were misunderstood, chased through Europe, ready to be hacked to pieces. The Giordano Brunos, the Nikola Teslas. You're in real good company when you have that kind of emotion. So welcome it, make it a friend, make it a house guest, and don't try to get rid of it. I
like that a lot. That's what I do, and that's why I do this show. The Post-Human World and the End of Evil with Michael Tsarion. That's tonight's show. Michael will be back in just a moment. It's the end of the hour, and we'll come back with a full hour. We'll dive deep into this. So don't go anywhere, folks. It's the Bob Tuskin Show. Hour number 2 of the Bob Tuskin Show. Michael Tsarion continues with us for the next hour, taking a look at a lot of great topics, but Michael's got an exciting announcement, folks. and perhaps we are the first show to announce it, and I'm looking forward to it. I can't be there. I don't think I can be there. I'd like to be there. I'd like to fly over the pond and come see a full-day event. Is it, Michael?
Yes, it's the first one. That's why it's special.
The first full-day event.
Yeah. Every other talk I've done, the longest is about 3-point-something hours. Even our Age of Manipulation 1 was a sequence of 3 months, but it was 3-hour slots. So
I have a feeling, though, Michael, that you could do a full week event and still have things to talk about. Yeah,
I agree with you. So this is actually, excellent for me to be able to do this first. It's a challenge, and to get to the solutions and do them right. To lay on the groundwork of what we're going to talk about, and then move up to the solutions where you have lots of time, rather than trying to squeeze solutions into just, the last half an hour or 40 minutes. Most people, most events, you only get an hour, 50 minutes. So it became very, very difficult to lay out what you want to talk about and then get to these solutions in enough time. It just simply has been impossible.
Yeah.
So this event, my promoter and I sat down to really think about doing the whole day event and go for that and make sure that we've got 2 hours to do all the solutions, because the solutions involve children. It involves this question of the self. It involves all of the various questions that arise when you're dealing with the we, the us, and the our, and so on. Lots of amazing stuff to get into about solutions, about what constitutes an individual, and so on. And again, the bigger theme about how do we in fact get rid of evil. There's at least 3 things to do with children, and there's about, I'd say, equal amount 3 other areas that need to be looked at for everyone, for other individuals. So it's about 6 sections in all.
Well, I know this may sound cliche, but the children are our future, and I'm doing this for our children's children. And if we raise zombies, we get zombie adults, and it's as simple as that. We need to give them the proper critical thinking skills, the proper logic, and these sorts of things. Michael, we have a lot of listeners in the UK, though, that would be very happy to come see you. When is the event, and where is it?
Oh, it's on the 10th of September, coming up all day in London, so very central. People can drive or take a train. It's right down there. It's actually about a few blocks away from the main Masonic Mother Church, actually, right down there near Covent Garden. And people can find information on the website iCanPlanet, I-C-A-N, iCanPlanet.com, or just go to my forum or whatever, or email me, whatever it might be. But iCanPlanet.com is where the tickets are available to reserve seats. And those seats are absolutely limited because we picked a really good place that's comfortable, and therefore it wasn't very big. So again, the seats, since it's an all-day event, you wanted a place that was comfortable. And therefore the seats are slightly more limited than if we had a big, gigantic place where it was really uncomfortable. So again, people should book as soon as possible for that.
Great. And your website, michaeltsarion.com, I'm sure it's linked up to there as well.
It is, yeah, to the forum. Yeah, exactly, it is. In fact, if you go to michaeltsarion.com, it's the first thing you'll see. So, yeah.
Very cool. All right, Michael, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll jump into this. We'll preview a lot of what you're talking about, but as we just said, it's only going to be scratching the surface. Nonetheless, it will be fascinating, folks, and you're not going to want to miss it. So stand by, folks. We'll be right back in just a second. It's the Bob Tuskin Show with special guest Michael Tsarion. Okay, Michael, let's jump right into it. I want you to preview some of the things that you're going to be talking about in your talk tonight, or not your talk tonight, in your talk in London, September 10th. That's easy to remember, the day before the 10th anniversary of September 11th. By the way, folks, we're going to be doing a full week leading up to September 11th. I think it's on a Sunday, so the full week beforehand, we're going to be doing a special on the Bob Tuskin Show in which we're going to have different people on for little segments, lots of guests, whether it's Michael Tsarion, you name it, tons of different guests. Michael's not confirmed yet, but I'm just saying, in general, tons of different people, as many as possible, and I want to ask 3 simple questions. Where are we going? It's now 10 years later from 9/11, with all of this information, the truth, whatever. What are we doing about it? And what can we do from this point on? I want to get a gauge. It's 10 years later, and it means a lot to me, so we'll be doing a special for that leading up to the 11th. But Michael, go ahead. The floor is yours. Take me through some of what you plan to cover with this talk.
Well, you've already sort of said it in a way. It's fantastic what you just said, because that is exactly one of the main openings of this talk. The talk itself is meant to be a milestone. The event in London, first of all, it's my first all-day event in London, which to me is a milestone personally. But it's based on the idea, and I think we even have this on the promo, to tell you the truth, or one of the videos that we made to promote the talk, and that is that in my Atlantis book, if people open it, the first thing that they'll see is this line that says, in the next 10 years, we, human beings, will have the solutions and the answers to our mysteries of where we've come from, what it's all about, where we're going, what is our destiny. And that was written about 9 to 10 years ago. So I was always myself wondering what would happen, when 2010, 2011 comes along, because I was absolutely convinced, almost one could call it, that you had a vision, but it was a vision stroke rational thing, because it appeared to be very logical to me. I simply saw how far myself as an individual had come with the learning process of these extraordinary matters. Other people that I knew, I looked at the conspiracy community. I wouldn't say I looked at the New Age community, but I certainly looked at the conspiracy community even back then, 10 years ago, and it was, going at a phenomenal speed towards incredible revelations. I mean, I'm talking here the Michael Cremos, the Lloyd Pies, the Alex Joneses, the David Icks. The amount of download, and then of course not forgetting the great books that have been written on religion, on Egyptology, on conspiracy. Look at the Lyndon LaRouches and the Jordan Maxwell's and the Eustace Mullinses, and because I was studying all of this, and so to me it seemed like this was such a productive and vital field. That doesn't mean it didn't have flaws, but it was such a vital field, and so it was quite easy to see that in years to come, my goodness, if this is what we've already discovered in just 10 years or whatever, and I'm even forgetting to mention the marvelous work of some of my mentors like Ralph Ellis, Mustafa Gadala, Ahmed Osman, the list goes on. So I was thinking, if that progress has been made, where for decades upon decades of time, the questions about the races, about the planet, about the geological changes, about the nature of evil, of all of these things, cosmology, you name it, mythology, right? We're having those answered. We're actually having them answered for the first time. Then what's the next thing? The coming of the medium by which it's transmitted. There you are yourself, Bob, with a radio show. There we have the internet now, which replaces the TV screen. It opens us up to the world. It's like unthought of, unheralded discoveries, technological discoveries. Once in history. Absolutely unique. So it was very clear to me 10 years ago that not only is the subject matter unique to us, what we're discovering, that was not available to our forebears, simply was not available to the average agricultural man or the early city dwellers and the factory workers. It was always available to those extraordinary individuals, but it was never available like it has been today. And then the second thing is the medium is also historically unprecedented. So then you took all of that and said, well, where are we going to be in 10 years? And it was left in no doubt in my mind whatsoever. It was part vision and it was part reason that said we will have those solutions. And we are. Where we are right now is phenomenal, actually. So this talk that we're doing in London is meant to be a milestone to celebrate that, to try and bring together what we've learned. Never forgetting that what we've learned is ultimately about the self. This is the core of my work, that never leave consciousness at the door, never leave the individual at the door. So we're not just talking about abstract, discoveries or what have you. We're going to find out, what do we really know now about ourselves? And also then, the most important thing is, where are we going? What am I going to say about where we're going? In my eyes, the world is now ready for those solutions. It's ready to handle. And I'm not going to lie to people, this is controversial, it is dark, and it is also going to be work. It's going to signal work for people. And that's why my work, as I've always said, isn't for everybody. Because in my life, the people who want the answers also have to absolutely have the courage to accept the answers. You actually need even more than that, but that'll do for a starter. Is that you need the courage to accept the answers, because even a lot of people in the New Age movement, a lot of people in the conspiracy movement, and a lot of people in life in general, Everybody can just verbalize that, yeah, they'd like to know what the meaning of this is and what's really going on and, what's it all about. But those people are not going to sweat for the answers. They don't have the courage to even accept it. That's what I think we were trying to talk about earlier at the beginning of the show. Men can really be divided down that line. Human beings can be divided there. Between everyone can say, I'd like to know, come on, tell me what it is. But when they have to go and make the individual journey, they're not really so prepared. So that smaller group of people who are now ready for sort of like the advanced course, in my mind, there's no doubt about it that this talk that I'm doing is for myself just going to signal that moment of transition. We've been leading up to it, and I don't find any other place to go. So, it's a sort of a way to look at it as like an advanced class for those people who are really serious about now working with these specific psychological tools that involve consciousness, so that they can make themselves so immune. I said this was the content of the last chapter of the Atlantis book, about not fighting evil with the weapons that the evil ones give you, but trying to come up with a different solution. And my solution was a certain, what I refer to as psychic immunity. Developing, just in the same way that the body has antibodies to fight off any antigens and pathogens that enter into the body. And that is a miraculous, by the way, biological feat. So we also need it on a psychological, psychic, emotional level, because our walls are wide open. We are completely wide open. I mean, it's just unbelievable how many holes we've left in the wall of our psychic defenses. And this works across the board, from the domestic sphere into the work life and further up the fractal. And until we have the boundaries, we're not going to, be successful. But of course, you don't want to start building walls that keep others out that then ends up keeping you in. So what kind of boundaries are we talking about? Knowledge, the boundaries of a certain kind of knowledge. So my confederates, other people, we've all been looking and we've all been adding various bricks to build these walls of defense and build this immunity. But unfortunately, it's a specific kind of knowledge, and a knowledge that's deeply, deeply psychological. And this is the kind of archive that ordinary people need to grasp in order to have those permeable walls that, keep the bacteria and the viruses and the pestilence out. So because we're living in a sea of toxicity. You mentioned it earlier yourself.
Sure.
We're living in a sea of psychic pollution. It's a drip down pollution from these architectural control, and we need to immediately know how to secure ourselves again.
Absolutely. It's scary stuff. And with this exponential growth of information being transferred through shows like this and the internet, there also comes a bunch of fluff, and unfortunately people get buried in that fluff. Anyways, we'll talk about that some more. We've got to take a quick break. And I also want to talk about the infighting, because I think that takes away from true progression. All right, folks, it's the Bob Tuskin Show. All right, folks. Now, as you know, this truth movement, whatever you want to call it, tends to be a bit of a bowel movement. And I'm not putting anyone down, I'm not putting the ideas down, but there's a lot of infighting that goes on and not enough common ground, solution-oriented initiatives and activism, which is important. People get the personalities mixed up into this and don't look at the information, so they shoot the messenger. I'm a shill. Michael Tsarion's a shill. Everyone is a shill. Michael, how are we going to get past this distrust of even people who are not a part of the dark side, or at least not necessarily a part of the dark side? Yes, we should question everyone. I tell listeners all the time, question everything. Question everything we say on this show. That's great. But don't you see this as kind of a destructive sort of path we're on?
Well, it's ongoing. I think that I've probably been lambasted more than almost anyone in the field. I mean, it's arguable, but
what do they say to you? What are their criticisms?
Oh, there's all sorts of stuff. You're an what is it? You're like a white supremacist. I've got.
Are you a Mason? Are you a member of any of these secret orders?
That's the one.
Are you? Well, I might as well ask the question since we're on it.
Oh no. I have an ideological. Why would you phrase it? I have a ideological contempt for all secret societies. I've never been even close to joining one. I think whenever that even occurred, I ran a mile. It's just not something I'm interested in. I have an actual ideological hatred, I would say, for any. I actually think partly it's silly. To me, it's like a Monty Python type of silliness. Everybody there dressed up in their uniforms or their Masonic nonsense. So it looks silly, and to me it is silly. But even, of course, deeper than that, I have great suspicion. I've made a study of these people all my life, and I'm not, now that doesn't mean that I accuse every master Mason or every normal Mason, who's a member of the Masonic Lodge. That's not what I'm saying. My criticisms are exclusively focused on very high-level Masons. So again, if people are members of these organizations for their own needs, that's perfectly allowable. I'm not, again, an extremist who tells people what they should and should not do. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to things like Masonry, I reserve my criticism and comments for extremely high-level, blood-level Masonry. And I have Masonic friends. I have people that are, Knights Templar degrees and what have you, and they support my work. So, on an individual level, I treat every individual. But I think the people that you're talking about fall into several different categories. One is the kind of people who are deeply threatened by any kind of nouveau subject, cutting edge stuff like conspiracy. They're very threatened, first of all. Secondly, they're funded. And that's not just me saying that. There's people like Dr. John Coleman and people like Lyndon LaRouche and even Eustace Mullins. I think it's a given that these people are too smart, too funded, and they come after you. So that's a key thing. So you're not going to step past that. You're always going to have these people throwing rocks and stones. Then you just have internet lice. You just have the normal internet maggot who hides behind a handle.
Trolls.
Yes, exactly. And they can just, throw cheap shots at you, or they have a personal beef against you. We've had all sorts of threats and all sorts of, hassle from these people. But, they're crazy because I'm just bulletproof. The kind of life I've lived, on the streets of Belfast make me immune to anything like internet trash like that. You better come and get me, because you better do something, because I'm not going to stop. And if you try to tell a man from Belfast to stop, you've just now guaranteed that he's going to go on forever and ever and ever just by you telling him he shouldn't do something. So you've used the worst policy possible. It might work on other people, but it certainly won't work on me. So, that's their mistake. And I think then just the simple ignorance factor of the garbage that they spew forth already shows you who they are. So they don't need any profile, because they themselves, as soon as they speak, they subtract from the total of human knowledge. They're their own worst enemies, and they're their own worst advocates. And I think that the internet's getting tired of them as well. What I've noticed is over the years, you have these people commenting and throwing muck around. And I think that now even the general mass of people that visit the internet are sick and tired of reading this illiterate, absolutely vitriolic nonsense. So I think I encourage them. I've always encouraged them. I've never tried to stop people, berating me. I've actually encouraged it. I even had several forums, all of them which crashed, at some point. But on them, I encourage people to just go ahead and slander me as much as they possible, with the idea that I can play for time. It's like the tortoise and the hare. Get it all out, get it all out, get it all out. I want people to play with their shadow. I want them to speak up. I'll speak right up to them. That's what they don't like. What they don't like is I tell them to their face what I think of them. That didn't go down very well. But so what? I would tell them that to their face in person, and I'll certainly tell it to them, through the media. Now, what they didn't like was that I'm immune to it. They threw all their garbage at me, and then finally, there's no more garbage. They've just exhausted themselves, and like dinosaurs, just crash into the black hole from which they crawled out, And then eventually that'll happen collectively, and people will then start saying, we don't want these people on our forums. We don't want these people, cluttering up the airways. Go away. And that's what's happened, because the internet is based on the planet Uranus. And Uranian energy, in its negative side, is all of this crap. Uranian energy is too much free-for-all, too much just chaos, and as time goes by, the higher energies of Uranus, which is deeper communications, deeper thought, really extending beyond the Saturnian and Martian paradigms. So when that change is happening, a lot of people get scared, and they react in a Martian way, that means aggressively, and they act in a Saturnian way, that means conservatively. And so it's no surprise that people like myself who work within the Uranian field or have Uranian energy or Plutonic energy, that we get this. It's a backlash of the shadow. You get it in daily life, in your domestic circle, and you get it in public as well. And you just have to stick it out, because these Saturnian Martian paradigms are largely being deconstructed right now.
Sure.
And later on, the more positive aspects of the Uranian and the Plutonic will come in. But in that gray area, people feel very confused about what to do because these Iranian and the photonic energies are new. They haven't hit us ever historically.
Well, if we keep it to the facts, if we keep to the information and use the trivium, critical thinking skills, and so on, we can look at information into itself and don't shoot the messenger. And if we use that sort of attitude, I think you're more likely to see that yes, there are shills out there. There is COINTELPRO, even in the so-called movement, and there are agent provocateurs in all of these conflicts a lot of times. But it is a logical fallacy to say that because there are these people and that they do exist, that somehow everyone, because of any information that might contrast or differ from what you think, is automatically a shill. If somebody differs from your views, their information differs, that doesn't necessarily make them COINTELPRO.
And again, there's a big difference between mudslinging and true criticism. There's a difference between even cynicism and direct attack, and true criticism. None of these people are actually critics, because a critic is a polite, informed person who argues with you in a philosophical context. Argument does not mean with violence or with attack. They're interested. They want to wheedle out of you what you believe, who you are, what you're talking about. And I have never once been approached by a person like that. These so-called people who are meant to be critics were just scum. First and foremost, they're scum in their own lives and they're scum in their interactions with other people. Really sick, sorry people. These are people that just because they see me using the British term we, when I speak about I, thought there was something dodgy about me, and that he must have a team of, they said he must have a team of people working on everything. Jesus, I wish I did. He mustn't work alone, and he uses this we. That's really suspicious. He must be an Illuminati shill because he's using the term we. When all that is a simple grammatical third-party, normal thing you find in most literature. And then because I mentioned some of my mother's friends and other family friends who were in the New Age movement, they believe that I also endorse those people and were personal friends with these people. As a matter of fact, the truth is I didn't even have to like a lot of these people, and some of them are my own family members.
Yeah, people have no idea. All right, folks, we'll pick it up in just a moment, and I want to ask you about solutions. What are some solutions that we can implement? Hold that thought. We'll be right back. It really is amazing stuff. Hey, folks, welcome back to the show. It's the Bob Tuskin Show. Michael Tsarion is joining us, and we're going to get away from the infighting. Everyone's a show. Yeah, I know. Email me if you want to reach me, bobtuskin.com, Tuskin. There's a contact there. Just follow the info and fill out the form, and I'll read your email. I might not respond to everyone, but I do read all of my emails, believe it or not. But Michael, let's talk solutions. What are some solutions that we can implement? On this program, we talk about taking control of our food and water supply and getting prepared, growing a garden, these sorts of things. What are some solutions that you're recommending?
I think those are all important. We have to get our arms around all of that information. We have to, and when I talk, a lot of people, think I'm not including social action. That's not true. I am. But I think that social and political action should probably take up about 30 to 40% of a person's energy. But no more, The rest of the time and the energy should be put into getting the inner house in order. That's the psychological person, the self. And that entails, part of the solutions is to find out what stands in the way of a true self. You can't come upon the self directly. And that's why I keep talking about deconstruction, and I keep talking about apophatic learning. I keep talking about the fact that knowing the self is really, by definition, an action of the self. It doesn't involve a we. It doesn't involve an us. And it doesn't involve an our. That's contradistinction. All that the world controllers do is we, us, and our. That is their theology. That is their ideology. The antithesis of that is the action of the self to and for itself. And therefore, one has to then, as I said, you can't come upon what is a self. Or let's speak in religious terms. You cannot come upon the spirit or the soul directly. That's just the way it is. There's nothing that can be done about it. You come upon it by, it's almost like that Arthur Conan Doyle concept of once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. You have to discern, once the false is seen as false, then the truth is known. So this is where our schools and our parents and everyone is very, very wanting. All the kind of knowledge and the teaching that we have is acquisitive. It's always about gaining and grabbing and having a distinct, objective sort of grasp on things. But this is not where, this changes when you deal with the inner environment, right? When you're dealing with the external environment, there's certain rules of engagement. And certainly so engaging with other people is part of that process. But when you deal with the self and the psychology of the self, that is a completely different landscape, a completely different environment, and it's a different weather. It's different terrain, you know. And we have not been taught, or only few people have been lucky enough to taught, or only few people have the hard wiring to do this. My work is to try and give some of the tools to everyone, so that it's not that people genuinely don't want to evolve. They all do. People in this world are desperate for spiritual progress, but they're going the wrong way about it. So I'm trying to familiarize my audience with more of the apophatic, deconstructive paradigm that was known to all the great philosophers and all the great thinkers and seers. And then also open up the way, you know, it's like William Blake saying, once the doors of perception are cleansed, man sees things as they truly are. But I always add this, because I'm philosophically a personalist. Individuals must give themselves lots of room to pursue that completely privately and on their own without necessarily wanting to prove it to everyone else or even have the approval of everyone else. Remember we were talking in the beginning of the show about what is good and what is bad. Obviously there's the good of an individual, what a person individually understands as good. And then there's this other good. It's almost like a pseudo-good. The good of what society tells you you must do. And from the very earliest age, I mean, we're barely born and we're already being instructed and coerced by hypocritical parents and a hypocritical society that's saying, we will tell you what is good, you're not going to think about it yourself, and we will tell you what is bad. If you do the good that we say you should do, you will get all the rewards that we can give you. And those are very, very, desired awards. We really want them. We need them. We need those social approval. And then by the other hand, the prohibitive side says, and if you do not do it, we're going to break your balls. We're going to bash your head off the walls of the universe. We're going to make your life totally difficult. And
trauma-based mind control.
Yes, this is where it leads, of course, further up the ladder. But the mind is already, the mind of the so-called self, the person, the being that we call the self, or that the person we wake up every morning, we think this is me waking up. That individual is not the true self. That's a pseudo-self that is a construction of society, starting with the parents. And we believe that we basically it's a form of auto-hypnosis. You asked what I'll be talking about in the talk. A lot of it will be based on this idea that we have really auto-hypnotized ourselves. So we have ideas of the world, ideas of other people, and we have an idea of ourself. And it's this idea that needs to be constructed so that the true self, the true spirit of man, can be created. I've even gone so far in other talks to talk about that we're here to develop what is called spirit or what is called soul. You're here on this planet to develop that which is called spirit and soul. It did not come in with you. You have a spark of life, yes. You have this innate matrix of understanding. But you, and only you, can build what has always been religiously called the soul and what in psychological language is called the self. That doesn't come in with a child. And that child has to work at it. It's the hardest work we'll ever do. And we're here to do it. And nature is our instructor, and occasionally other people can be guideposts and so on, but we are meant to do this. So a lot of words, a lot of terms have to be rethought. We've got to go back to the foundations. You see, my work does this a great deal, to be able to walk through, permeate all these talismanic terms, and try to get down to what really is the true meaning of a lot of terms like self and being and love and violence and darkness and all of these other terms, and God and reality and nature. We have a very flimsy understanding of what even some of these terms mean.
Yeah, well, we think of nature as separate than us.
Yes, precisely.
And it's not. We are a part of nature. We need to work with nature, like permaculture suggests, something that we love to talk about on this show when we talk about gardening and that kind of thing. And essentially, it says we got to work with nature. Look at ecological systems. All of these things are connected. And this isn't a new age thought, but this is absolute science. And rather than being conditioned to think of ourselves as separate in this divide and conquer conditioning, we need to look at it from what kind of perspective would you call it? A more, I don't know. We need to look at it differently, I guess. I don't know how we should look at it exactly, but we need to look at it from being a part of nature, working with nature, not separate. Like with the whole creation story, for instance. They say that we were created on the first day, and then the sun was created on another day, and then the earth on a different day, and so on. And I got the order and the things all mixed up. But the point is, no, it's essentially one. Okay? And again, this is not supposed to be new agey, but that's how I see it anyways.
That's right. We have to look again at all of these things that have been put in front of us as either mythologies or children's stories and try to see through our own eyes, make our own decisions. Some things that we will definitely learn from other people that are very, very good, but there's also things that we're learning that are very, very wrong. And the bottom line is what is wrong for ourselves, what is wrong for an individual. If people, see, this global village that's coming down the tubes has been a long time in the making. There's even been many versions of it down through time. So we are at a crucial moment right now. We are standing at the one junction of the road is to completely, as I say, and I mean this 100% factually, we have it in our power to end evil so that no force, no matter how powerful, tyrannical, or strong, can ever stand against it. Once the right tool is, they say one small match can light up a whole room of darkness, but the same amount of darkness cannot extinguish a room full of light. That is what we're dealing with. But the other road leads straight smack into the global village and even into worse, because even the global village, they sort of present it to you as something scintillating. Yeah, it doesn't mean your train is going to stop even though it passes through the doors of the global village. You might not be able to disembark until it heads into the dungeon that they really want to take you into. So the thing is that these utopians, their global village is now being prepared. And it's not just the preparation of that dystopia, it's the preparation of the kind of individual who will be comfortable in it. So my work is, again, not going, in the talk, I'm not going to get into the more headline information about all the gadgets that constitute creating robotic man, right? There's so many people have dealt with that, and it's very much even in the mainstream headlines about the various implants and the cybernetics and the genetics. I'm not going to bore people stiff with that. I'm going down into the ideology, as I said, the ingredients of tyranny, to show how even this kind of utopianism comes about and what will lead to and how we buy into it. Really getting deep down into what it's all about, what kind of thinking has created this monstrosity, and that kind of thinking is day by day infecting us. It's infecting our children, it's coming through the television, it's coming through the paradigm. It's a false understanding of the body, as you said. It's a false understanding of nature, false understanding of the seeds, false understanding of the fruit, false understanding of animals. And we ingest it. We don't think we're doing it because it happens so gradually, this incremental, process that they work with.
The list goes on and on and on. Boy, has time flied. When we come back, final segment on tonight's show. It's the Bob Tuskin Show, folks. Don't go anywhere. All right, folks. As usual, not enough time, just barely scratching the surface. MichaelTsarion.com is our guest website. And you can check out all of the stuff there, including the link to his new talk that he's going to be giving a full day, a special event September 10th in London. Check it out. But Michael, why don't we finish off with, I don't know, something positive, because, we could sit here and talk about the negative symbolism and all these different things, the powers that shouldn't be in their sick, evil cabal of pedophiles, but let's talk about something positive. Give me something good.
Well, I think that the thrust of where I'm going right now in overview is that based on a philosophical understanding about evil, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. And the first thing that people need to realize is that that which you call evil, and we've already spoken about that one needs to really do some heavy research to find out what true evil is, how it comes about, right? But once you've done that, you discover that evil in its deepest form contains within itself the seeds of its own destruction. And this is an extremely important point that needs to get into the heads of everyone. It's certainly not a recipe to say sit back and don't do anything. That's not what this means at all. But it means that anyone that is evil, or any entity that becomes evil, and as we know the list is quite long, but all people who buy into an ideology of evil are in themselves making a colossal mistake, because they don't realize that they're not, that they're basically terminal. Because evil is the antithesis of nature, right? The natural order is in perfect harmony and perfect balance. And therefore that which is evil can basically be defined as that which is in contradistinction to those natural laws, to the laws of nature. And therefore those two things are loggerheads. And nature is not going anywhere. The laws of nature are here to stay long after our species and umpteen other species, come and go. Billions of years, nature's still going to be here. And therefore those laws are inviolable. Those laws are inviolable, you see?
Yeah, well, I think it's important, though, that people get a good understanding of natural law versus man-made law.
Right.
And natural law is such an important topic to talk about. Not a lot of people get that.
No, they don't. And you spoke about permaculture, you spoke about going back to the land. That's why I endorse a lot of this stuff, because that is crucial. Because that nature is your teacher. But then going back to our point, is that if it is fully understood that evil has within it the seeds of its own destruction, then that person who chooses an evil road or acts evilly, has no sustainability. And that gives you the knowledge that in fact evil can be brought down. It isn't permanent. It doesn't stick to the wall continually. And therefore it is weak within. It has an Achilles heel within. So in my work right now, not right now, but we started the process 10 years ago, but had to go incredibly slowly while other doors opened up. I'm a very spontaneous person, so when, my opportunity to do symbolism, or opportunity to do Irish origins, or, opportunity to do this, that, and the other, I always follow it where it went. Never leaving go of the main thread. Some of the strongest work I've ever done has been these theories on the nature of evil. And so in this talk and in the series that's to come, we will be getting into that in its multifaceted form. Always bearing in mind that we are now privy, not just on an individual level, but on a collective level, to discover what that particular core is. What is that Achilles heel? And to use it to our best ability. That doesn't mean that everyone should just believe what I say. We all have a contributing, voice to give to this. We'll all have to reconfigure it and vision it in our own way, even create a new language to understand this concept. But the general theory is that what we call evil, and that includes injustice and all the other things you mentioned, all the horror that this world has been soaked, drenched in for centuries, man's inherent capacity to just be so, vile and sadistic and what have you. Within that evil that we know, there is the seed of its own destruction. And therefore it's like waving a red flag to nature, say, come and get me. So the evil person, it's like Socrates saying, to harm another is to harm oneself. Dorian Gray, he runs towards the canvas to stab the evil thing that he's created, this horrible canvas, and the moment that the knife goes into the heart of the picture, you see Dorian Gray falling down to the ground dead. He stabbed himself. So we are at this crossroads point now, where we either understand what we're doing, that the people who are immoral or evil, they're slashing about, and all of the actions that they're doing is causing only themselves the worst destruction imaginable. And we're not meant to stop them from doing that. That's fine. If they want to go and do that, they have the perfect right to self-destruct. But we don't have to be auto-hypnotized, you see, or under the hex to do likewise. I am not a person who wants to talk about what will happen when evil's gone and what people will be. That's irrelevant. Whatever people will be, will be. Whatever harmonies come about, whatever people want to pursue, is completely an individual matter. The job right now is to make sure that we're aware to not go down to the scintillating global village that's shining on the horizon, imagining that that's going to be peace, security, safety, a faster, brighter, cleverer, happier and safer and healthier world. All this nonsense that's been thrown up towards us, which is based on what? It's based on a preconceived idea of the imperfection in nature and the imperfection in man. All these Craig Venters and all these lunatics are severely disturbed pathological creatures who see the world broken, who see man as being inferior and broken. And so they're running around with billion-dollar budgets and their Rosicrucian Knights Templar symbolism, trying to fix what isn't broken, like putting earrings on the Mona Lisa. And they are creating a disastrous world in which we might have to inherit it. So people like myself, I don't want to be living amongst the people who are going to be globalized and indoctrinated. I don't want to live in a global village with those kinds of robots, like some demolition man, equilibrium type of movie.
I don't blame you, but where do we go? They don't call it the New World Order for nothing.
Well, that is very true. First of all, it's not. I think who was it who said it was Eustace Mullins? First of all, it's not old. The creatures we're talking about have had a world order for millennia.
Sure. It's not a new world order. It's been around for thousands of years. I agree.
Yeah, it certainly is. And first of all, it's not order either. It's the disorder I've just been describing. It's the disorder of chaos, of slime.
I think
we don't like order.
I think we've come up with a new term. How about this? The old world disorder.
It's one of the chapters in my Atlantis book.
That title?
Yeah, I think it's chapter 3 or something.
That's great.
And what we're really dealing with here is a kind of, and this is what I'm doing, the anatomy of tyranny discussion will be to try and get into the kind of thinking of that kind of, parasitical, pathogenic species. Because they're human. They're not even human. Or let's put it more correctly as I do in the talk. They are human, that much they share with all of us, but they're not beings. And we don't have time to get into all of that, but in the talk I will be. We say human beings, and those are two very different words. Human is a biological description, right? It's the lump of flesh and bone and sinew that we share with other human beings. It's an anthropological term. It's a biological term. It's a physical term. Being, as you well know, Bob, is a philosophical term. Right? That's a metaphysical, philosophical term that is only understood by the great metaphysicians, the Hegels and the Platos and everybody else.
People need to understand the theory of knowledge, the epistemology, and all these different facets of themselves, and understand their being, not just their physical, useless, eater, goyim, profane goyim body. So we need to definitely go beyond that. Michael, we're all out of time. I wish we had more time, but that's what the lectures are for. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, and that was the optimistic note to end on, was that we're going to learn more about this being, so that's the thing to look forward to. Learn about the beingness is the key for the future.